Hi, Jim here, and you're listening to the Honest Filmmaker podcast, career advice from people in the business. This week, I'm speaking to filmmaker James Chigg. James has recently finished his debut feature film, Feet of Death. We talked about what it was like to work on such a micro-budget feature, how he gets such high-quality results on such a low budget. We talked about the challenges of shooting on a low budget, and he also talked to me about sales and distribution. He's signed with Indie Rights, but it was interesting to learn about the different offers he had before he made that final decision and why he decided to go with them. Enjoy. So talk to me, first of all, about your route into filmmaking.
I, like most filmmakers, went to school to be an engineer. And then
Okay.
after about a term of engineering, I realized I wasn't great at differential calculus, and I switched to a liberal arts degree and started learning about my hobby, which was I had a little Sony Handycam that I played around with in high school and made little, short videos and stuff. So I was like, maybe I'll play with making videos. So learned the basics of editing and it wasn't a film school, so I got to kind of do whatever I wanted. I learned a little bit about 3D. I worked at the news station at college. I learned about nonlinear editing, I learned about Final Cut, all that kind of stuff. Then out of college, went to work at a local TV station making wonderful local commercials. I don't know about over there, but there's really cheesy local commercials at the news stations that they do here for like Mattress World and other little low budget commercials. But it was great because I cut my teeth on script writing, interacting with clients, learning how to edit, because basically there was two of us in the whole commercial production department. So I kind of got to learn how to do everything, which was great. And then slowly just moved up after a couple of years to a bigger TV station, doing more of the same stuff, worked in news for a little bit, realized I hate news. But my passion was always filmmaking and getting more into that higher end production. So eventually I kind of learned that I was halfway decent at visual effects after doing a bunch of training on the side. I don't know if you ever heard of Video Copilot, but back in the day, that's where I learned a lot of stuff back when Andrew Kramer was not a popular name in the VFX community. But yeah, learned how to do that. Started doing freelance stuff. Got a gig at a VFX house working on an NBC TV show called Grimm, which they did a lot of creature stuff. So eventually went from a junior compositor all the way to leading my department after a couple seasons of that, and did that for like 5 years. And then I decided to do something crazy. I was playing on YouTube, and I was married at that point. I had 2 kids. The show ended, and we sold our house, bought a fifth wheel, and traveled around the United States for 3 years, documenting our journey on YouTube. Super random. But then after doing that for 3 years, the world fell apart and the pandemic happened. So we bought some property, settled back down, and I decided really to focus more back onto film, independent film. So I started working as camera operator, hooked up with some people that I knew from the past, got VFX supervising gigs because, I had my VFX pass. Just started writing because I realized no one's going to give me anything to direct if I don't start writing. So I've written 4 or 5 scripts with my writing partner. And then about a year and a half ago, I was like, you know what? I think I've got enough experience. I'm just going to do this. So I jumped into figuring out how am I going to fund this project. I specifically wrote Feet of Death, which is the movie that's coming out, to know that I could shoot it on a low budget. It's things in the script that I have access to, and it plays to my strengths of knowing visual effects, knowing camera, knowing basically I wrote myself into a corner knowing I could do this. So it was a very low budget film, but it looks, in my opinion, way higher budget than what we actually had.
I can attest to that. I think it looks really good quality, looks proper. So what was the actual budget for the movie?
The production budget, believe it or not, was $12,000.
So then my first question, and I want you to tell me about the film itself in a moment, but the first question is, how have you managed to make that film for, because to us over here, UK money, that's probably about 10 grand. How have you managed to make a film look that good for that little amount of cash?
Well, a big part of it is I had done all the different departments, so I knew what I needed crew-wise, what I could get away with. So number one mistake that a lot of people do is they don't, which doesn't make it look good, but they don't hire sound, and sound is half the battle. So I knew I needed a dedicated sound guy there at all times. And then I knew I had a decent camera. We shot it on the Blackmagic 6K Pro that I owned, so I didn't have to rent camera, so that saved a lot of money. But I did rent lenses, and that's key. A lot of people don't think that lenses are that important, but honestly, they're more important than the camera. So if you can get a nice quality cinema lens that gives you that shallow depth of field, that lets you shoot in low light, that gives you that filmic look, that goes a long ways. And then actually lighting your scene. You'd be surprised how many of these low budget indie films they just use natural lighting, or they don't even think about like, oh well, let's turn down the overhead lights and just like they don't light it at all, and that kills your cinematic look. So spending a little bit of time, I had my whole crew was my sound guy, a PA, and my DP and me. That was it for the whole thing. And my DP actually, my first original DP actually dropped out on me 4 days before filming, 4 days before principal
Nice.
photography. So I had never met my DP until the night before we started shooting, and he was just a recommend from somebody else I had worked with. So I was like, okay, versus my original DP I had been on like 6 different films with. I had worked under him. We had all this, and then all of a sudden he had scheduling conflict. So that was a nightmare. But thankfully, I kind of have. I wouldn't call myself a DP, but I can light, and I know the basics, and I know what looks good. So between this other guy and me, our experience, we were able to use our little bit of lighting equipment that we had to, I think, make things look halfway decent.
So what I'm taking away from that is you own the camera, perfect, saved you a big expense. You rented lenses to give it that high quality look. You cared about sound, which I always go on about is so important. If you get the sound wrong, it just makes it the whole thing seem cheap.
Yeah.
So you got your sound right. So tell me, what's the plot of the film? Explain the film to me. Feet of Death.
So, Feet of Death is a mystery thriller monster film. I wanted to write something that was in the horror genre, but I'm not a big slasher fan. So I wanted something that was more of a whodunit. You're trying to figure out there's these string of murders in this small town, and there's this forest ranger that has lost his wife. So he's spiraling into like depression. So he's struggling with pulling himself out of that to doing what he cares about, his career, and looking into these murders. And eventually you're led down the spiral where this social media paranormal influencer and this USF's ranger, their paths cross, and you're trying to figure out how they're intertwined. And is it a person committing these murders? Is it a monster? Is Bigfoot real? What's going on? It's really more of this big whodunit mystery film as opposed to your normal Bigfoot found footage or your slasher or any of the millions of other low budget indie films you've seen. Because that's again what I wanted to do is set ourselves apart from your standard sub micro budget film, your standard found footage Bigfoot film, or just found footage in general, or documentary, or whatever you want to call it. I wanted it to feel
Mm.
different, feel of a higher quality than those things. I get very distracted when I'm answering your questions. I started giving the plot, then I started talking about my film. I'm sorry.
You're going to tell me the twist. Don't tell me the twist at the end. So then, looking, because I've chatted to another American filmmaker who did a Bigfoot movie. So when you decided that was going to kind of be the subject
Yeah.
matter, was that a commercial choice, or was that a I love it choice, or was that a oh I live near a big woods choice?
It was, I'll be honest, I am not a massive Bigfoot fan. I haven't grown up loving Bigfoot, but I do live in the Pacific Northwest of the United States where
Mm-hmm.
it's Bigfoot country. I own 5 acres out in the woods, so a large portion of this movie was actually shot on my property. So I specifically wrote it to, I know there's an audience for it. I know it's a genre and a horror niche that will market and sell because I don't have the money for a name. So it was very strategic in what I chose. It was not like a I'm obsessed with Bigfoot and must make a Bigfoot movie. It was business decision whilst trying to write something that I myself would want to watch.
And was it all your own money you put into it, or did you get
We
anyone
did
give you
do
some
a
cash?
crowdfunding campaign. I'll be honest, most of the crowdfunding money was money that I had raised beforehand from friends and family and people I knew. But we did get a little bit from the crowdfunding campaign from people who saw that we were doing it. But we raised 10 grand. And so
Yeah.
The rest of that, the other $2,000 was our own money, and then I paid myself nothing. The reason why the film was so cheap is because I did all the editing, I did the sound design, I did the VFX, I was the director slash DP. I literally did everything. The only thing post we hired out, which actually we got a guy to volunteer it because he's an old friend, was color. Everything else,
Right.
deliverables, poster design, whatever, no one touched it but me.
You must hate this movie, do you? Or are you still in love
I
with
have the
it?
poster up in my office, so I still don't
Yeah, it
mind
looks
looking at
good.
it.
So, have you got any good money saving hacks that you've learned in doing? Obviously, you talked about um, designing the film based on what you have within your means, but are there any other little things you learned along the way to save cash?
Learn how to do everything yourself. um, yeah, no, definitely. It goes back to scripting. I did have some help from another filmmaker who kind of helped mentor me, Joshua Caldwell, who had done multiple films, and he read through the script and was like, do you really need, like, one big thing was, do you really need this location? Like, there was a whole nother office location. It's like, we're only in here for one or two scenes, but you could totally put this in another place. So once you're done writing your script, where all writers are probably like me, where you start writing and you write a multi-million-dollar script, then you got to go back and be realistic. I can't shoot this. So you consolidate, you remove, you figure out, okay, I don't I didn't want to shoot this all in one room. That's another thing low budget films do, is like one location, but then it makes it feel like a small one location film. But if you can find that happy middle
Mm.
ground of have locations that you have access to, or locations that you can get for free, while also, if you can keep it contained, like on my property alone, we shot in I think 3 or 4 locations, so there was no company moves, there was no driving, and that saves a ton of time
Mm.
and money. So if you can minimize the amount of time that you're having to pick up everything and go, even if you only have a crew of 2 people, you and your actor, you still have to get up and drive to that other location, and that just eats up your day. So consolidating locations is a big cost saving tip because time is money. Other than that, uh, I guess really just being honest with yourself, figure out what can I do by myself, what do I need to hire out. Like, I could have not hired a sound guy. I have a Rode Mic Pro wireless, whatever I could have put on people, but to me that was worth the money to pay someone to do that, because I feel like that was beyond the point of diminishing returns. It wasn't quite there yet. So, but maybe if I didn't hire a boom op to go with my sound guy, because that would have been worthless in my opinion. So my sound op ran the boom and he mixed at the same time, with just one guy. So just kind of figuring out with yourself
Mm.
honestly, like, okay, I can do this. I don't need this. Where can I cut costs? And then again, in the reason to post, it probably would have cost an extra 30 grand if I would have hired an editor, hired a sound mixer, a sound designer, someone to do 5.1. If I would have paid someone to do color, if I would have paid to have all my deliverables done, my DCPs, all that kind of stuff, that I would have tripled the cost of the film. But I did it all myself.
And what about? There's a lot of cool drone shots in it. Is that your footage? Is that stock footage? What is that? And how did you get that done?
My DP did have a nice new. It was not like the big one, but it was the Mavic Pro, the one with 3 lenses. That
Hmm.
was cool, but honestly, the majority of the drone footage was actually on my old drone that I went back out, just me getting some stuff on my Mavic Pro 1. So it's like a 10-year-old drone camera, but it shoots 4K and it looks phenomenal as long
Mm.
as you are making sure that you're not shooting on auto and you know where you're shooting, like you're shooting not directly into the sun. It looks great. So I would say 70% of the drone footage is probably on that camera, and 30% was the DP's drone footage.
Yeah, no, it looks really, really good. That's why I said, is it stock footage? Because I was like, oh, this looks amazing. But if you manage, you obviously live somewhere that's quite
Yeah,
picturesque.
we literally shot it like in the film. We reference Mount St. Helens. That is actually Mount St. Helens. I live just outside of the
Mm.
national park, or the national area.
And what were the sort of struggles making that film that you hadn't anticipated?
Well, my DP dropping out 4 days before we started shooting, that was
Mhm.
pretty big. One of the big struggles we had, so we had one location day. There's a cave scene that takes place in this really cool big cave, practical location. We didn't obviously build it, but it's a 2-hour drive from our home base. And so it was like we're driving out there, we're spending the day shooting, and then we're driving back. When we got out there, there's no power. We're in this remote area. I brought a generator, but my generator wouldn't start. So we had zero
Mm.
power. Thankfully, I have a little electric generator that basically is just a battery bank with an inverter on it. Unfortunately, we made the mistake of brewing our industrial coffee size coffee on that, which drained our battery bank all the way
Oh
down to
no.
like 40% or something like that. So we had this one little battery bank to run all of our lights on in this cave scene. And when I plugged it in and turned it on to see what it was like going to give us an hour of runtime. So after like trying to scramble to figure out, oh my gosh, what are we gonna do? There's nowhere around here to buy it. Like we weren't near a Walmart or something where we could go buy another generator. Uh, so we ended up plugging that battery bank inverter into the cigarette lighter of my diesel truck and ran my diesel truck for 10 hours straight to charge the battery
Wowzers.
bank to then run an extension cable 200 feet down into this cave to charge our or to run our lights, and then we just had someone there that would turn on and off the light when we weren't shooting to try and charge it up. But I like to say that my big Ram truck was the most expensive and largest generator on an indie film that there's ever been. So that was a fun challenge. This was my first time directing the full thing. I've done some second unit stuff and I've done VFX supervising, but I've never actually directed anything. So really, the whole being the one to talk with actors from start to finish and just the world of directing was a new challenge for me. It wasn't a bad challenge. I loved it, but it was all new and unforeseen ground for me. So that was exciting.
And talking about actors, um, how did you handle the casting process? And any tips for doing that when you've got no money to play with?
So yeah, that was a struggle to be able to find good talent that was willing to work for very, very, very little money. We did pay them, and it was an agreed upon rate from the beginning. It's not like I tricked them or swindled them or whatever, but it was nowhere near like your SAG rates or anything like that. So we did a combination of there's a website called Backstage. I think there's a casting calls something or another. I started out there and like on Facebook groups, there's lots of Facebook groups that have local film actors for your different cities. No matter what city you live in, there'll be actors of Portland, Oregon, or actors Seattle, whatever. So just posting those. Seattle's a couple hours north of us. Portland is just like an hour south of us. So we're right in the middle of those two big cities. So I would post on that. But actually, I got probably 3 or 4 of my actors through. I hired one, and he or she, I don't remember who it was represented by a casting agency, just like it's called Pacific Blue Big Fish Northwest, and she was great. I then talked to his manager, and I'm like, I'm looking for like these 3 people, and she sent me like a list of like 20 people who are available who would probably do it for that rate, and I actually found a couple people through an actual agency, and she worked for basically just her cut of their fees, so she made 10% of what they made, which was not much.
Mm.
So she did a lot of work for very little,
Mm.
which was great. So it was a combination of a whole bunch of things: social media, backstage casting, which allows you to cast worldwide if you want to, and then also a legit casting agency who represents a bunch of people.
And I also notice you work with your wife on the feature films, and I myself do that. My wife Laura is my producer, um, and I know a lot of couples that work together on films. So why does that work for you?
Because it has to. I couldn't pay anybody else. No, my wife Ashley is great. She was kind of like the jack of all trades to help me with things. She did catering. She helped me figure out location stuff. She helped me with wardrobe. She was sewing the Bigfoot costume when it got ripped. She basically was just my supporter. So no matter what I needed, she was there to help me out. She has zero film background, and she, to be honest, doesn't really want to be in film, but she loves me and supports me and does whatever she can to help me.
Perfect. And I notice also, am I right in saying your daughter was also your PA on set? Is
She
that right?
did come for a couple days. At the beginning, she was not going to, but then she was there one day, and she was like, "Oh, this is kind of fun." I let her run Slate, and then she got really into that. So then she's like, "Can I come tomorrow? Can I come the next day? Can I do this?" So after like the third day of filming, she was there as much as she could. In fact, she even was like, uh, she would rather have come to set than she was going to do some sort of play date with her friends. And I was like, "Well, that's up to you," but I was excited that she kind of got the bug of that because she's 10 at that point, And so she's super little, but she was really getting into it.
And you're now at the stage where your film's finished. Have you? How are you handling sales and distribution? Have you got that locked in? Are you looking for that? What's your sort of strategy at the moment?
That's a whole other can of worms. Again, that was my first time ever dealing with that because I've worked on multiple feature films in a variety of capacities, but I've never done the money side, the sales side, the paperwork side. I've always been more of the hands-on creating side. So that was a steep learning curve of basically I got a list of like 30 or 40 distributors, sales agents, whatever, just from scouring the internet, the different lists and groups and stuff, and just kind of cold emailed them the trailer I had, the poster, the log line, that kind of thing. And I did get bites from a handful of people, both wanting to represent, and eventually I actually did get some upfront cash offers. I got one
Okay.
that was a really small MG with a red split. I got some buyout offers for in perpetuity. I eventually got one down to a buyout offer for like 15 years. But just it's such I'm very early stages, so whether or not I made the right decision, I don't know. But I eventually ended up saying no to the buyout offers, no to the upfront MG stuff, and I went with Indie Rights. So I have assigned with Linda from Indie Rights. I just actually had a meeting with her yesterday, and they have all the streaming rights and whatnot. And I believe it's a 3-year contract, which is great. No one else is anywhere near that. The shortest other one I had, I think, was 10 years as an offer. Of course, there's no upfront money, but I retain ownership, and it's a 80-20 rev share split, which is just standard for them. So it's not like I got anything special from them. That's what anyone they take, that's usually the kind of gig or the kind of contract they offer you. And the reason I did that as opposed to just accepting the upfront money, because the MG I would have covered our costs plus some, and I would have been able to pay
Mm.
myself. But I just had faith in the film, in that I feel like we would be able to make more than this, especially in the 15 years or the in perpetuity that some of them wanted, than that buyout was. And so we decided to roll the dice and just go for it. And hopefully, fingers, we didn't have, because we crowdfunded and it was our money, we didn't have any investors that we needed to pay back like in 6 months or anything. So I'm hoping that in 3 years, or at the very least 15 years, we will make more than we would have if we would have just gotten that one lump sum.
Agreed. And I think that when I hear in perpetuity, it seems like such an unethical thing to offer someone
Yeah.
an in perpetuity to take that away forever. Doesn't seem like that should be legal to me. Um, and hopefully you've made the right choice. So I've just released a film with Indie Rights, and
You
so
did.
far so good. Yeah, so fingers crossed with that. And I've heard very good things about them, which is one of the reasons we signed with them. So that's interesting to hear. I also noticed on your website you edited a feature film called "The Most Dangerous Game," starring Tom Berenger. Um, how did you get that gig? What was that like?
So I've worked on a handful of features with a director named Justin, and we actually met back when I was working at the VFX house, and we were both playing around with YouTube back then, and we collaborated in a couple of shorts back in the day. And then when I went and started traveling, he had moved down to LA and made connections and started shooting some indie films. And then we both kind of moved back up here to the Pacific Northwest in 2020 when COVID happened and the world fell apart. And we reconnected. And so I started working on his projects. That he's the one that I was doing camera operating for. I VFX supervised some of his stuff. Then I did DIT and AE on one of them. And then after that, he's like, "Oh, dude, you did a great job cutting this just in the DIT room." And so then he was like, "Do you want to edit this?" I was like, "Heck yeah." So that was the first, I can't remember if the Most Dangerous Game was the first one I cut, but then I cut two more, one and a half more after that. So I've cut multiple of his films. And I'll be honest, they aren't the best films in the world, but they're films with a budget with, the B-list actors, and they got distribution. They were in Walmart. They were in the Best Buy. There was physical media out there. They were in Redbox back when that was a thing. Sad day,
Mm.
RIP Redbox. But yeah, that was how I got it. Basically, I had made a connection with him back when we were both nobody's doing fun YouTube videos, little video game shorts and things like that. And then we both, which is honestly like how it works, is you raise up together. You're not going to reach out to Spielberg or whatever. You're going to find someone who is at your same level. Whether you've done 0 films or 1 film, you reach out to someone that's your peer, and then you move up together, and you guys help each other out, and you grow at the same rate. That's how it happens, in my opinion, or in my experience.
Agreed. And then I was going to touch on so you traveled America in this RV, did a bunch of videos, and I noticed on your YouTube channel, they got pretty good views by the looks of things. So did you make any money out of that? Was that do you know what I mean? Were you selling advertising? Were you paying for the trip with that, or was it not a lot? I mean, is that something you're happy to talk about?
Yeah, we did. We were on YouTube for a long time. Before we even traveled, we were doing just the family vlogging thing back when that was people actually watched that. We never got massive by any means. I think our channel got up to like 80,000 subscribers, which is great, but it doesn't pay the bills. We made a little bit of money from your AdSense, and we had a few brand deals. Actually, we had we were just about to do a big deal with Camping World, which is a big RV seller in the United States over here. And that's when COVID hit, and then they slashed their budget. So then that disappeared. But we did make a little bit of money, but no, it didn't. I still, on the road, would do freelance visual effects and freelance motion graphic stuff and whatnot with my connections that I had before. So I had a laptop and I had internet hotspot. And so I would just do freelance work on the road in between the YouTube stuff.
I hope you enjoyed that episode. If you'd like to hear from more industry professionals, how they got into the business and how you can do the same, or you just want to listen to some cool stories from movie sets around the world, then please do subscribe to the Honest Filmmaker podcast.